Welcome to another episode of History Tea Time. One sip of history at a time. Amongst the uncultivated times of the Dark Ages were present polymaths and men of genius, though they were surrounded by darkness and dense gloom, says Petrarch. Is this correct? Were the Dark Ages really that dark? Today we'll debate and draw conclusions about the Dark Ages and its actuality in about 10 minutes. Click on the like button and subscribe for more sips of fascinating history, broken down for anyone to follow. Firstly, we'll focus on understanding. What are the Dark Ages? The early Middle Ages, also known as the Dark Ages, started from the early 5th to the 6th century and lasted till the 10th century. It was located in Western Europe and began with the downfall of the Roman Empire. But how did the Dark Ages come to be? The Roman Empire was toddling on thin sand by the middle of the 3rd century due to economic problems, civil wars, rebellions, plagues, and the assassination of emperors. Hence, the powers shifted towards the east into Egypt, Syria, and Anatolia. Unlike the eastern portion of the Roman Empire, which had a dense population, the western portion of the empire was becoming acquainted with poverty. Due to the inability to handle migrating tribes, the Western Empire of Rome was experiencing a slow downfall in the 5th and 6th centuries. The army could not control the people, and the centralized imperial government was no more. In the midst of this chaos, warlords were doing power grabs to gain control over individual provinces. As a result, Western Europe during the 6th century was riding waves of poverty. The cities were falling apart as the landlords went back to the country and the impoverished followed them. The regions had returned to a previous model of the agrarian economy, as schools also closed down, without any students present. Education of their sons was impossible for the families, and books got misplaced after wars. Much information was lost about the ancient world for centuries until the Byzantine and Muslim trade started. Most Western European regions took their sweet time recovering from the economic collapse. Spain fared rather well off, even with this situation. On the other hand, Italy, France, and Britain only managed to recover 2 centuries later in the 8th century, Sicily in the 10th century, and Rome during the start of the 14th century. Click on the like button and subscribe to History Tea Time for more sips of fascinating history, broken down for anyone to follow. Why was it called the Dark Ages? Coined by Francesco Petrarca, the founder of Renaissance humanism and an Italian poet, the term Dark Ages refers to 900 years of history before the Renaissance began in the 15th century. It stuck as a label because he believed there was no literature to credit the time. Due to the usage of the expression by other scholars, Dark Ages became synonymous with the literature of 5th century through the 14th century Europe. As more information came to light, scholars started restricting the term to early Middle Ages, namely, between the 5th–10th century. The term was also used heavily during the time of Enlightenment in 18th century Europe, the period in which philosophers were grappling with connecting the religious concepts of the medieval times to the Age of Reason. They contrasted the religious leanings of the Dark Ages with the Renaissance and its antiquity. To quote another Renaissance writer, Caesar Baronius calls the 10th and 11th centuries as Saeculum Obscurum, namely the Dark Century, in a text of 1602. Since there were no documented records, so was it really a period of slow cultural and scientific development? Larissa Gros-Le-Monde, a medievalist, tells us it simply meant that nobody knew a lot about that time. Many medievalists believe naming it as Dark Ages was a grievous mistake by Francesco Petrarca, better known as Petrarch. To pretend that such a long period of time was filled with unsophisticated people and had no cultural advancement is a travesty. On the contrary, Christian missionaries have summarized this period in great length and tell us that the kingdoms of the early Middle Ages were extremely interconnected. In actuality, it was learned that the Dark Ages as a concept was first developed by Germanic scholars who were biased against Rome. They viewed the time in a comparative sense against ancient Rome and ancient Greece, which, according to them, were the pinnacles of human civilization. Italian scholars like Petrarch were heavily influenced by Germanic scholars and believed the early Middle Ages to be a time of chaos and darkness where, in addition to having no great leaders, no scientific and artistic accomplishments were produced. On the opposing hand, some scholars call the Dark Ages the bright ages of early Middle Age kingdoms. There were exchanges of ideologies, religions, rituals, and inventions with the help of commerce. Trade was spread widely in the early Middle Ages. Records show that artifacts from China, India, and Sri Lanka have been discovered in early Middle Age archaeological sites of Ireland and Sweden. The influence of the Roman Empire can also be found on two Anglo-Saxon coins. The first coin, autographed in Latin and Arabic, belongs to the time of King Offa. It is a reproduction of minting produced in Baghdad by the Islamic Abbasid Caliphate. The second coin displays Coin Wolf, king of Mercia. Gold coins illustrating the influence of the Mediterranean are a sign of vastly and internationally performed trade. This shows early Middle Age kingdoms existed in an interconnected zone and provided bases for religion, economy, and culture to develop. Literature and edification also did not take a back seat in the early Middle Ages, though it was mostly limited to those living in monasteries and not for the masses. Most of the history during this period was actually passed down orally, which is why initial Renaissance scholars were misled to believe there was nothing historically significant happening in this era. During the 8th and 9th centuries, the court of Holy Roman Emperor Charlemagne was pivotal in promoting Latin texts and generating unique and unexplored worldviews. Additionally, in England, there are around 1,300 manuscripts existing from before the 12th century. They talk about a variety of topics such as religion, medicine and remedies, real estate, science, travels and poetry, prose and verses. Such manuscripts were created under the guidance of monasteries. They were written by abbots, archbishops, priests, monks, abbesses or nuns. Women also played a central role in the learning of the early Middle Ages. Many rich and prosperous women belonging to non-religious communities also had a propensity for literature. For instance, Emma of Normandy, King Snut's wife and queen. That being said, there was definitely a lull in literature when Vikings arrived during the 9th century. However, it was only temporary. Finally, from the end of the 18th century onwards, scholars of the time realized that the Dark Ages were not that dark. The French Revolution during that time and the industrialization of the world completely reversed the previously negative image of the Dark Ages. European countries then observed it as a period of development of national identities and political progression, which laid the foundation for the modern European states that we have today. Even though history passed down during the Dark Ages was primarily done orally instead of on paper, it doesn't mean that the history was not equally as meaningful. Early Middle Ages, Anglo-Saxon societies could keep in memory deeds of the land, familial and marital relations, and also recount poetry. An English bard, or the minstrel of the time, could recount epics over a duration of many days, which pointed towards great mental retention and strength. Just because the means of recording history was different doesn't mean it shouldn't have equal value. In summary, even though the economic stability and the manner of recording of history during the Dark Ages was not as Renaissance scholars would have liked, it was by no means a period of stagnancy and pure downfall. In fact, it was the exact era when the foundations of modern-day European culture, literature, and art were cultivated. Before leaving, don't forget to click on the like and subscribe buttons and share this little sip of fascinating history with your friends. Thanks for watching.